And you're very welcome. This is your Betfair Trump Punters legal action update, and this is Fintan Dunn reporting. Folks, congratulations, 930 people signed up on the email list at last time I checked it earlier today. Wow. So we are going to go through to 1,000 most certainly, and we haven't even gone public yet, folks. When we do, that number is going to double, perhaps more. We'll see. So where are we at now? Well, I know everyone's in a hurry, wants to get it on. I want to get it on too, but let's just check this out first, folks, before we get too carried away. You see, there's an ancient Chinese proverb which goes along the lines of anything very complicated must be assembled with a great deal of care. Otherwise, exactly. And that is the danger. Unless you assemble something rather complex very carefully, you might end up with it blowing up on you. So when we go to court against Flutter or Betfair and its various entities, we don't want to lose. And when we go into IBAS against the company, we don't want to lose. Same down in Australia. When we make our cases, whatever they are, we need them to be successful. That means taking time to make sure we assemble it. So the good news is I have put together an executive summary of the legal issues as best as I can see them from having been on the case on this thing for a long time. Wait till I just pull that up for you. Here we go. And it's entitled Trump Punters versus Betfair, Legal Issues in Summary for the Betfair Trump Punters Legal Action Group. So what I'm at here now is not drilling down to the detail, because detail will change from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Company law and other legislation, etc., consumer rights, etc., they will change with jurisdictions and may not be the same in all. So we need to look at the case in general. And anyway, that's the best way to do it. You know, you can drown in the detail on these cases, and that's not what we want right now. We want to see it in broad scope, and we want to figure out what particular line of attack is the best line of attack on this, and how succinctly can we put our case together. We don't want to be all over the place trying to establish it, but to be able to establish it succinctly and clearly. So let me step you through the highlights of the legal basis, which I hope we'll be able to bring forward now in complaints to dispute resolution people or legally. So it starts off with identifying the defendant, which is Betfair, which operates betting exchange markets related to events such as sports games or political events. Participants in such markets buy and sell market tokens, which are part bet, part tradable instrument on the exchange. So this is an important point, that what we are dealing with here is we are dealing with not just a bet, but also a trading opportunity, which is implicit in every bet because you can cash it out at any time. So we then are the plaintiffs in this matter, us Trump Punters, who took place in this market entitled the Presidential Election 2020 Next President. And we as plaintiffs claim that the defendant breached contract with us by suspending that betting market on the 14th of December 2020 and closing it well in advance of the official result from the relevant governing body for that election, which result came in the early hours of the 7th of January from a joint session of the US Houses of Congress. So, 14th of December, markets closed. It was nearly 3 weeks later when we actually got the official result. So we also say, besides that breach of contract by them closing the market in the way they did at that time, that the defendant was negligent in setting the rules for the next president market. We also claim that the defendant is bound by the public advice it issued and by its advice to individual customers with respect to the expected timing of the closure of that market, and that the advices the defendant issued ran contrary to its subsequent action. And we finally claim that the defendant denied us as plaintiffs our due trading opportunities, causing us the complete loss of our market share and the loss of the opportunity to profit by disposing of the market stake at an advantageous time, sometime between the 14th of December and the 7th of January. So we had a right to trade that market stake, to exit the market if we wanted, and we should have been given that opportunity. So that's the heart of the claims. Now, straight away, we go on the attack, because our first legal and key legal point is, you made a straightforward offer of a bet to us. We're taking the face value of that offer, thanks, not the small print you didn't clearly disclose. So we explained then, and you're familiar with this as somebody who's visited the site, what you are presented with when you go to that site, and how you get a table of odds and you can click one, just explaining to somebody who, like a judge, who isn't necessarily familiar with how all this stuff works, what's been going on here. And so we explained how you could set up a transaction where the Betfair exchange is not a bookmaker per se, but an intermediary who takes a commission on an exchange between market participants. That's what Betfair is in this case. It's not a bookie. It's simply regulating, operating, and taking a commission on an exchange between private individuals. But when we purchase our bet, we get a market token, which is akin to a financial market option contract. This instrument has an expiry point. So our bet has an expiry point at which it either goes to zero in the event the candidate loses, or if the candidate wins, it multiplies in value per the odds when purchased. And this betting market instrument can also be bought and sold at any time before expiry, and the current sale value of the instrument is displayed on the web page above the table of odds as a cash out amount. So we're familiar with that if you've operated in this market, wherever that is. Yeah, here we are. So you were able to see cash out, and you could cash out at any time as you watch those odds change. Now, key to judging, we say in this legal summary, when to invest or when to sell, cash out, is knowing when the market will end. Because in most cases, the outcome of the bet is determined when there's an official result from a governing body, and then the market ends. This is the default in betting. For example, the outcome of a horse race is the official result from the race stewards. And indeed, our claim points out, Betfair's general rules reference this point. They say markets will be settled as set out in the market information or the specific sport rules, which will be the specific rules for the next precedent market, but where the market information or sports rules don't specify what basis to settle on, markets will be settled on the official result of the relevant governing body. So we're making a big point on that because that's going to be key to our case, the whole issue of the relevant governing body, because the relevant governing body was the US joint session of the Houses of Congress on the 6th, 7th of January. Back to the claim. Now we come to the contract between Betfair and us. As we've said, they operated a betting exchange entitled USA Presidential Election Next President. And we got the odds, and then we were able to buy a stake in the market. But at no point in the process, our claim says, were we as customers shown the specific rules for this market. There was an unremarkable text on the busy market webpage which said rules. This had to be clicked to display the actual text of the rules. But no active measures were deployed by the defendant to ensure customers were even aware the market had specific rules and what these were. Customers were not required before purchase to check a box, confirming they'd read the specific market rules, nor were they forced to scroll down through the rules before purchasing a stake in the market. Are you familiar with that? You ever get a piece of software and you try to click, yes, I've read the rules, and it won't do it. It makes you scroll down through the rules, and then the little thing lights up to say, I've read the rules, or some way of ensuring that you read the rules. And here's what we're saying about the visual display in this case. So I'm sure if you're a pro, you know where the rules are, but maybe if you're not a pro, you don't. Maybe it's here, refresh, multiples, cricket, golf, promotions, my account, my bets, help, casino, Joe Biden in play, cash out, I rules, there it is, pin, there it is there, that one, that's rules. Okay, says our claim. Now we see the rules that you're talking about. And let's just go on. We say, we're not bound by any rules which prove to be highly material to our purchasing decision, yet were not overtly communicated before purchase. Right? If a rule's going to be important in a bet, you got to tell us about it very clearly beforehand. And we're not going to be bound by any rules that turn out to be very important, that were in that little rules thing that we were supposed to click on. If it's really important and it's in there, you better have shown it to us. Now we're saying that's in line with legislation and court rulings regarding consumer rights to adequate disclosure of all material terms. So we're holding them to the simple fact of that bet. This is in line with legislation and court rulings. Now, the defendants, Betfair, have justified closing the market by relying on a portion of those market rules. I'm sure you're aware of them. And we say if the small print is so material it makes a mockery of the plain language meaning of the offer, and if such small print isn't prominently disclosed, then the effective legal offer to us was the plain language meaning of the offer. And we're saying you can stuff your rules if they go against what we took when we took a next president market, betting on whom in plain language would be the next president. Plaintiffs bet, that's us, on an outcome. Not on an electoral process, but unambiguously on an outcome. Anything in those rules which undermine that, we're not having it. And we're saying that there was something in those rules which tried to turn it from a plain language bet on an outcome into a bet on an electoral process proxy for an outcome. So we weren't betting on next president after all. We were betting on something else that wasn't really next president. I see. Maybe you should have told us about that, Betfair. So let's see what it was. What was going on in those rules? And so on we go. The specific market rules, when you clicked on that little rules thing, were entitled Next President. And normally the bet question follows. So here was the bet question. Who will be elected next president of the United States of America as a result of the 2020 presidential election? And we say this confirms that we were betting on an outcome. See where it says as a result of. That's an outcome. And we say the inclusion of that term binds the defendant to administering this bet market based not on what happened on the 14th of December, but on the outcome of the election. Because that's what they said in the second or third line of the rules there in the bet question. The outcome of the election. So then, as you all know, I'm sure we had a load of sentences about projected electoral college votes and faithless electors and the procedures of the 12th Amendment. Let's take a look at them then individually. The first one we say, let's start with this. Market will be settled according to the candidate that has the most projected electoral college votes won at the 2024 presidential election. Well, the term projected electoral college votes is in common use to describe the US Network Television Corporation's predictions. So this rule here, they're trying to foist off on us in these market rules, is trying to reference these predictions as a proxy for the relevant governing body, which is the joint session. This rule is trying to say, oh, we're not actually going to base how we settle this bet on who wins, but on who has the most projected electoral college votes according to some network television company. So we're saying you can stuff that. Now, to the uninitiated, we point out that the first stage of any US presidential election is the selection by the voters of the membership of the Electoral College. So you see, you don't vote for president at all. You sort of do, but you're ending up voting for electors who then vote for the president. Okay. And the television companies predict the outcome by projecting the makeup of the college. Now, thus the defendant, Betfair, is attempting to insert a rule to make such a projection the basis for settlement. Now, hang on. A projection is not something to which either political certainty or legal certainty attaches. A projection is not an official result from a relevant governing body, and a projection is subject to political bias, which could adversely affect us. What if the network television companies don't like us politically? They may project an outcome which impairs us, and you may base your bet then on that. We're not having that. We need results from official governing bodies, not television companies. We say any subsequent events, such as a fateless elector, the stuff they had in there, will have no effect on the settlement of the market. Well, a fateless elector is a member of the Electoral College who, suppose they're a Trump person, but rather than actually voting for Trump, when they get sent to the Electoral College, they say, oh, I'm actually going to vote for Biden. And in some cases, you can't do that in some states, but in some states you can. Even though you've been sent by the people who voted for Trump, you can welch on the deal and become faithless. So that's what that faithless elector is about. And you find out when they cast their votes on the 14th of December. Now, that kind of faithless elector who changes their mind or what they're supposed to do could affect the outcome of the election. But the rule above by the defendant, Betfair, says that that kind of elector will have no effect on the settlement. It says faithless elector will have no effect on the settlement. Thus, the two rules above together would perversely permit the defendant, Betfair, to declare settlement in favour of a candidate who subsequently went on to lose. If those rules are admitted, a candidate with a projected majority of Electoral College votes is not assured of victory. Faithless electors might lie in ambush. Legal challenges could set aside whole slates of Electoral College votes. Objections and debate at the joint session could see that official governing body reject whole slates of electors from a state of the Union. So we assert we're not bound by these rules because they were not based on an outcome. They were very material to our bet, but they should have been brought prominently to the attention of us, and they weren't. So we're not being bound by them. They don't apply. We're going back to what you said, which was you offered us a bet on next president. It's a plain simple bet. You welched on that deal. Let's look at the third sentence in the defendant's market rules. And I'm just going to take apart, because somebody needs to, the way they put those market rules together. And the 12th Amendment. Now, they had a piece in those market rules. In the event no presidential candidate receives a majority of the projected Electoral College votes, this market will be settled on the person chosen as president in accordance with the procedure set out by the 12th Amendment. For clarity, note the 12th Amendment governs all the processes of the election. It doesn't just kick in the event somebody doesn't have a majority of projected Electoral College votes. 12th Amendment is what it all happens under. And this thing that Betfair is constantly going on about presidential candidates receiving a majority, etc. Receiving a majority, or that has the most Electoral College votes won, right? That's not actually the fact at all. We assert that these terms are uninformed. Title 3 of US Code, which is what these elections are conducted under, and there's all the references there, make it quite clear that no candidate receives any votes in advance of the joint session of the Houses. Get it? When they say we will, in the event no presidential candidate receives a majority, nobody receives a majority of the projected Electoral College votes until 6th of January. That's what it says in the law, in the US Constitution and in the 1887 Electoral Count Act and in Title 3. Title 3 makes it quite clear that what happens on the 6th of January is we have tellers appointed, right? And all the certificates and papers, which were the electoral votes from the Electoral College of the 14th of December, shall be opened, presented and acted upon. So they're sitting in envelopes until such time as they get to that point in the proceedings. And then on the 6th of January, when those envelopes are opened, there's just one more step before these votes accrue to the account of any candidate. That's when you receive them. When they are written down in the list to the benefit of your name as candidate. When this happens, That's when they're received legally. Like when you sign for a parcel at the door, you see? Now, you wouldn't accept that a parcel company says, oh, we sent you the parcel and everything, and you say, show me the signature. I say, oh, well, we didn't actually get a signature. You say, well, then get stuffed. I didn't receive them. Similar here. It's only on the 6th of January they're received, because the tellers then make a list of the votes for the candidates. And there can be objections. The two houses concurrently may reject the votes. So clearly the election is not over, because this is the meat and potatoes of it, happening on the 6th of January. And then finally, the result of this shall be delivered to the President of the Senate, who announces the state of the vote, which announcement shall be deemed a sufficient declaration of persons, if any, elected President and Vice President, and together with a list of the votes, this is entered on the journals of the two houses as the official result. That's when the election takes place. See, it's in two parts, the elections in the United States. You elect electoral college members, or you appoint them, actually, not elect, appoint them, and then we have the election, and that's when it happens. So all these statements by Betfair about it being settlable earlier are rubbish. The earliest point was 6th, 7th of January. And also that confirms the joint session is the governing body. You can see them there counting the votes. There they go, and announcing the results, just like stewards at a racecourse. So we say that, bearing this in mind now, the defendant's specific market rules were negligently constructed. They're actually legally incoherent with their talk of receiving votes, when that's nonsense and nobody receives votes. And yet these were material to the offer, but they weren't disclosed. So we assert the defendant shouldn't have settled the market based on these flawed rules. We're not being bound by them. And instead, we say, let's go back to the defendant's general rules published on the defendant's website, which says that if the specific rules don't apply, then markets are settled on the official result of the relevant governing body. The market rules were incompetent and non-binding, and therefore the defendant's general rules apply in respect of the settlement. We're casting them back to the general rules. And these are not just the general rules of settlement. This is historically, since betting became organized, since it became an industry, you always have the outcome of any bet is determined by the official result from whoever the official governing body is. The official result, say for a race course, is that somebody crosses the line, somebody else crosses one after. The stewards look at all the evidence, everybody gets weighed if required, and then an official declaration is made. And this presidential election was no different. This should have played out the same way. And now we're on the home straight with this. So we'd like to make a little comparison then as part of our claim of the defendant Betfair's 2020 and 2024 market rules. There are telling and substantial differences between the specific market rules that apply to us and the ones that apply for the next contest in 24. I mean, when we were betting, it was called Next President. And when people are betting in 2024, it'll be called Election Winner. Why did they change that? We think that's legally relevant. Then the bet question when we bet, it was who will be elected as a result of the election, right? But the new question in 2024 is which candidate will win the 2024 presidential election. Now, we say there's logic in there, you see. We say the amended bet question has less focus on the outcome and allows them to settle ahead of an outcome. They changed the wording, which makes it was very focused on an outcome with us, but they've changed that wording. And they retain the projected electoral college votes. They're still talking this rubbish about trying to base stuff on projected electoral college votes in the new ones for 2024, but they have an entirely new section, this one here, in their 2024 rules, which wasn't in ours at all. And it resolves many of the issues which should have been clear in the bet in the first place. It says the market will be settled once the winners announced by Associated Press and the losing candidate concedes. Well, pity you didn't have that kind of wording in the last set of rules that applied to us, because you would have been able to say, oh, well, of course, if the candidate doesn't concede, we won't be settling. We'll be waiting to see what happens as an outcome of the election. So, if the losing candidate does not concede, this is the new rules, or if there's any uncertainty, this is the new rules, caused by recounts or legal challenges, then the market will be settled on the winner decided by Congress on the date on which the Electoral College votes are counted in a joint session of Congress. Yeah, exactly what we've just been arguing. Our bet should have been settled on. They're now admitting that that's the way it'll be done in 2024. Well, that's legally bloody irrelevant as far as we're concerned. So the timing's explicitly defined now, and we say these significant and substantial amendments were adopted by the defendant Betfair because Betfair became aware of the defects in the market rules. They realized they weren't up to scratch and had to change them. That's why they're changed. We're saying they didn't just change by accident. We're saying they changed because they knew they were a mess. Nevertheless, despite having changed the rules, the defendant acted back then and continues to act on the basis of the flawed rules. They're now saying, oh, we'll give a square deal to the people in 2024, but despite realising that we messed up, we're still going to continue to screw over the punters from 2020. Sorry, we're not having that, and that's legally relevant, and we're citing it. So then we go into an examination of the published advice on the timing of the settlement of the market. And I'm not going to go through the gory detail and every little bit of that, because I know you're very familiar with that. So we're going to just fly through some of the key aspects of the evidence that we have about what they said in public they were going to do, because we did have to rely on that as well. So just before the election, they said that it will be settled that a contested result was something other than a clean electoral college vote majority. Now it just says majority in the rules that we have the problem with. It just says simple majority, but there it's defined as a clean majority is a contested result. Now a clean majority is a higher standard. And of course, it wasn't a clean majority because 6 states were strongly legally contested at state, federal and Supreme Court level. That was anything but a clean majority. More evidence. 2 days after the election, 5th of November, they published further guidance. We'll only settle when there's certainty around which candidate has, again, projected electoral college votes. But we will wait for clarity, they said, around ongoing vote counts, recounts and potential legal challenges. Great. So 3 weeks later, they repeated the theme on the 27th of November. They're still saying we're going to not settle yet because of uncertainty about the outcome, potential legal challenges. Yeah, great. And these legal challenges were all over the place. There was a plethora of challenge at all levels, and some of them are still going on today. And certainly they went on up until the 6th of January. And we say that that guidance they said about potential legal challenges multiple times, that meant that gave us confidence that only an official outcome would resolve the settlement. When they said we'll wait and all the legal challenges issues are sorted out, we took them at their word on that, and we're entitled to do so. And then they went and shut the market. So again, that's relevant. We go on 2 weeks later on 10th of December. This is the tweets they put out. They put out a tweet on 10th of December now. They're still saying possibility of recounts, potential legal challenges. 14th of December, they're still going on. Electoral events that will take place within the coming month before there is certainty. Within the coming month. They're talking about what's going to happen within the coming month on the 14th of December. Just hours before they close the market. Because that tweet was subsequently deleted by Betfair Customer Services, according to Twitter. Maybe Twitter's lying. Now, we can't determine when that was deleted, but an inference may be drawn that the defendant Betfair became aware that those public advices were a potential liability, which makes it all the more interesting that that tweet was deleted, because later that day they closed the market. And now we're sort of getting to that moment, you know, that moment in a courtroom where it's all built up to this thing about who had the gun. So we've reached that moment in it where we nail them. So later that same day, the 14th of December, after putting out those guidances about waiting to see what happens in the rest of the month, they settled the market and issued the following statement. They said Biden has received 306 of 538 electoral college votes. Thus, we've settled this as a win for Biden. Biden has received, is that what you said? Well, look, received is something we went through. Neither candidate would legally receive votes for another 3 weeks. Ba-boom. Biden has received. He hadn't received. That is just you expressing your lack of understanding of what's actually going on legally in a US election. And they said, we apologize for any. However, the settlement will stand regardless of any different result. This again presumes the defendant's right to determine the winner of the bet, even if their determination differs from the subsequent official result. See what they're saying in that? They're saying we've settled it for Biden, plus if Trump eventually wins, tough. I like the chutzpah, but it ain't legal. Well, let's just put it this way. It's a violation or breach of contract. So that was unreasonable behavior, not reasonable behavior. They cast aside their own guidances, and Betfair, or Flutter, the defendant, established itself as the governing body for the election and the decider of the official result. And they did this with flawed material terms that they failed adequately to disclose. You must be joking. This is a gross breach of contract which caused us significant losses. And we're having you for that, sunshine. So let's see now what kind of losses, and just briefly examine the whole issue of cash out and the ways in which we as punters lost out by the breach of contract, which we've outlined now in the legal. So losses by us as plaintiffs as a result of the defendant's closure of the next president market. Now, we know we'd purchased this token, and this instrument can be sold. We've gone through that, and the current sales value is displayed. For example, if a 100 sterling bet was matched at 30 to 1, and if subsequently the odds available for that same bet declined to 15 to 1, well then the cash out value would be well over 100, because if only 15 to 1 is on offer in the market, a token with payout odds of 30 to 1 is worth more. That's essentially the mathematics of that. So if the price goes down after you buy, hey, you've got a very valuable thing, haven't you? Yeah. So this is how we can make money in a market. Odds can alter significantly with proximity to the outcome due to events altering the chances of victory. So it can get, the prices can start jumping around. Anyway, Betfair continued to take wagers up to the day it settled the market, and much of the 1.7 billion sterling invested had been bet after election day and after those network television projections of a Biden win. Most of the post-election wagers were placed at odds of over 20 to 1, some at higher than 30 to 1. And when Betfair settled the market, odds on Trump were falling. If that fall and the relentless growth of the market were allowed to continue, there would have been plenty of action in that market, and we would have had cash-out options any time up to the 6th of January. And the muscular contesting of 6 key states with legal challenges and political inquiries, that just accelerated, gathered momentum over the 3 weeks after they closed the market. And that momentum culminated in a huge rally in Washington and pressure on the president of the Senate to decline to accept the slates of electors for the contested states. Now, these events would have driven Trump backers' odds well down into single figures to 1. Odds before the closure had already spiked to as low as 11.5 to 1, even before they closed the market. We say those odds would have moved dramatically in our favour, and you can easily work out the benefit we would have gotten by calculating the odds at the time we purchased the bet compared to the estimated odds at exit, less commission. That would give you the potential profit for any individual plaintiff easily. And accordingly, we claim appropriate redress from the defendant for breach of contract, for the complete loss of the best bet stake, and for the loss of our profit opportunity. That's the case. Now, I'm not suggesting anybody make that the basis for a legal claim or make that the basis for a complaint to IBAS, what I've just read out to you there. And the reason is because I'm not a lawyer. And I think that whatever case is put together needs to be put together by a qualified lawyer. That's who needs to put it together. And so what I've merely done is, with the scope of knowledge I have of the issues, the evidence, and a certain amount of knowledge of how consumer law and other laws operate, I've tried to identify all the potential issues. But as to which of those issues are used and what basis everyone moves ahead on, those kinds of evaluations have to be done by professional legal people, not by me. And also the production of actual documents, which are legal documents, should need to be done in that manner too. So at the moment we have the benefit of being all together as one. So as we develop this legal basis for both court claim and complaints procedures, we can just get it coherent at this level first. This is the most important part of making sure that your rocket ship does not blow up when it takes off, is getting it right. And that means a good plan, and we'll have to, I'm open to critiques of the plan. It's a very, I've certainly tried to exploit every aspect of the legal case there. I think the most telling is the failure to disclose the market rules, and also the fact that we've identified that it's legal nonsense to talk about projected electoral college votes in any event. It's just legal gibberish. So those are key aspects, but I'm open to advice and input from people who'd like to contribute in the group on Telegram. Just look for Betfair Trump Punters or Betfair Legal. You'll find us on Telegram, also on Facebook, and you post in there. You can also find in the document, I'll upload it to the group and provide it on the Facebook group, etc. And you'll find a contact email for me there, which you can use to get in touch and just give feedback on the specifics of it and how you think it might be legally improved. And we'll assemble that, and the process of review of all that will go on. So I'm glad to report that following me sending that to, we're in the process of selecting a legal firm. So that process is one that there'll be due diligence done on. In other words, it won't be done privately behind closed doors by anybody. It's going to be done openly. But we're not ready to talk about what firm or firms might be interested in getting involved in this in any jurisdictions, because those firms don't want to be overwhelmed by claimants when they're not set up to process them. So the first stage of what we're at here is informing them. And I'm pleased to say that when I forwarded that document on to for initial legal review, that I didn't get a RO rolling on the floor laughing my ass off response back. So it's past that first legal muster anyway. I do believe it's a strong case. I'd certainly invite Betfair to get in touch and before there is reputational damage, and settle this matter with us. We're open to settling this matter. And I'd invite them to consider the implications, potential implications of that legal case we're outlining there, and to stop trying to hold on to these flawed market rules from 2020. You messed up, and we paid the price for your mess up, and we need to be recompensed for that. So that's as it stands now, folks. And that market and that little sign there that said rules, that wasn't anything like prominent enough. That should have been a lot bigger, folks, and everything that was in there that Betfair have used to try and evade responsibility for what they did in relation to these matters, we have documented, and I think we can prove. And I'm looking forward to doing that if we have to. All right, that's it for this Betfair legal action update. 930. I'm really encouraged by that, folks. We are go on this because of the numbers that have continued to come in, and that's before we go public on this. So persevere and do give us the feedback. And of course, you do need to work on getting your IBAS number, etc. what we're going to try and do is put any important information that you need as a critical update as a pinned message in the Telegram group. So you'll find us on Telegram there. All right, that's it for this update. I'll be back with more soon, and I hope you'll join me for that. But in the meantime, this has been Fintan Dunn reporting. Thanks for joining me.
Treat the word impossible as nothing more than motivation. Relish the opportunity to be an outsider. The more that a broken system tells you that you're wrong, the more certain you should be that you must keep pushing ahead. You must keep pushing forward. And always have the courage to be yourself. America is better when people put their faith into action. Pray to God and follow His teachings. Today, each of you begins a new chapter as well. Then you will not fail.